Hello and welcome to ZalthoLIVE, the podcast featuring Zen Buddhist Monk Claude AnShin Thomas, who will share with you his life experiences that includes not only military combat, personal violence, and addiction, but also healing, transformation, and the ongoing joy of everyday life. Please enjoy listening.
Questions? It's not a discussion group now. You ask, I respond, and we leave it at that. Seishun?
Anshin, other Zen teachers I've encountered give regular Dharma talks.
Mm-hmm.
You do these Q&R sessions, but don't seem to give regular Dharma talks. Could you talk to us a little bit about why that's so?
Yeah, I'm not so. Your involvement is more important. That's why I ask for questions. That's why I do these questions and response sessions. Dharma talks are like, yeah, I do them sometimes, but not too often. And I rather stimulate involvement to keep the community involved or the group involved, and not just talk at people. I'm not here to be consumed. I want to establish a participatory experience. So that's really at the root of what I do. And most Dharma talks, no, I'll just leave it at that. Good. Genrai?
Do you perceive pressure, and if so, how do you deal with it?
It depends. Sometimes, well, pressure is usually something that I don't put so much pressure on myself these days, although sometimes it's true. It's like when I'm involved in a building project, sometimes I can put unnecessary pressure on myself, and that prevents me from actually doing the work. Because I get all up in my head about how it's supposed to be done and try to figure it out ahead of time. And my antidote to that is to just start to work. Just do it. And just start. It's like the last time I was in Europe when I was at your house and there was all that garden work to do. You know, I just looked out there and it took me forever to get started because, you know, I just saw this, wow, you know, my mind was creating all these stories. And this one day I just went, just get over yourself, man. Just go start. So once I got started, it just went, you know. And so that's a kind of pressure I can put on myself. When I experience people attempting to put pressure on me from external sources, I respond to that in different ways. For example, if let's say I'm having email communication with Nicola, and Nicola starts putting pressure on me with, it's like, you got to respond to this like now. My tendency is to then just sort of put it in a side basket. You know, I don't respond well to that kind of pressure because it doesn't have to come to that. Now, I mean, if it's a consistent kind of thing, Nicola doesn't do that, by the way. I'm just used her as an example. She doesn't do it like that. If that were a pattern, then what's incumbent upon me to do is to speak with the individual and say, you know, if you don't wait until the last moment, then this circumstance won't happen. Sometimes circumstances arise that just need to be cared for right then. And actually, I don't mind that. I thrive under those kind of circumstances. And when I was beginning this trip down to Florida, may I use the example of our exchange? Okay. When I was getting ready to leave on this trip to Florida, to Miami, I was setting up the GPS. I use my phone, and I plug my phone into the car, and then it shows my phone is then mirrored in the car, in the infotainment box there. And I had the GPS. I pulled up and there's 3 routes offered. And I know what route I want to take, and I know how. I know how to function. I know how to work this thing. And KenShin attempted to take over the process, and she started pressing on me really hard and giving me all sorts of grief. And I just turned around to her and I said, KenShin, please leave this alone. I know how to do this. I reacted in what I feel was a very measured way in that occurrence. I had an interaction today with someone who was bringing a lot of pressure on me and didn't want, and I was attempting to talk with them, and they were talking over me. And in that circumstance, I became a little more assertive. I raised my voice. I needed to get their attention. So there isn't a set way that I deal with pressure, being rooted in practice, I trust my instincts. I trust my intuition. So if I start to feel that I'm being pressured, what I do is I sit with that for a minute. I don't immediately. I make an effort not to react to what I perceive to be pressure, but rather respond, and then see how that begins to unfold. I mean, once I asserted myself in this other circumstance, the person quieted right down. They understood it. So it's like there isn't a fixed way. There's no formula. I know that I was involved with a group. There is there's a man. He's since died, named Marshall Rosenberg, and he developed this strategy of nonviolent communication. And I was invited into a group where they were practicing this nonviolent communication. I was invited to participate. But they were so locked into the formula of it all that when they invited me in there, it's like it just destroyed everything. It's like the formula. For the formula to work, people have to be cooperative, and I was not being cooperative intentionally. And because then it was something outside of the formula, and so they didn't know what to do. So I don't. Pressure is not something I just, how I deal with it depends on the circumstance. Yeah. Yes, I feel it, and I deal with it much differently than today. I acknowledge that I'm feeling pressured. Yeah. Gabi, you have a question? Fine.
Is the wish to feel connected also a condition how the world should be?
Aus Deutsch bitte.
This prevents me. Okay. Ist der Wunsch, mich verbunden zu fühlen, auch eine Konditionierung, wie die Welt sein soll, und die mich im Endeffekt davon abhält, mein Leiden zu sehen?
Now, if you would translate that, KenShin, for the group.
Yes. So is my wish to wanting to feel connected also conditioning that is rooted in wanting the world to be a certain way and then also disguises my suffering?
Yes. Yes. Because there's this whole idea of connection. What a connection is supposed to be, what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to mean, how it's supposed to look, and there's a certain desperation and around getting the world to conform to my ideas. That is a product of the karma which I have inherited from the collective conscious I'm part of, and from the family situation I come out of. So yes, it is. It is a manifestation, because in that notion of connection, my ideas of it, I actually ignore all of the variety of connections that I have. because they don't measure up to my idea of what I'm supposed to have, that special connection, or connection should look like this or should look like that, and they should talk like this, It's like I need, everyone I meet then, I need to have a script. I need to hand them a script so that they know how to behave. And in fact, life is simply not like that. So the simple answer to your question is yes, it is a product of your conditioning, yes. Questions? Miyoko and then Natalie. And then Nicola.
Anshin, how do you relate to your intuition? Your intuition today, how do you relate to, was it there for you in the past, or how did you relate to your intuition before you started the practice?
Yeah, well, what I used to call intuition wasn't really intuition. It was all of my ideas of things. And today, that's changed. Intuition is something, it's not something that necessarily shows itself. So I don't attempt to strategize or think my way through different interactions. What I do is I engage in a particular interaction, and because of the foundation in spiritual practice that I have, I'm able to I'm able to notice my reactions to whatever's unfolding in front of me, and at the same time, I'm able to be more conscious of the unspoken way in which the world is directing me. It's a difficult one for me to articulate. I do the best that I can. I can only point in the direction here. But it's something that felt rather than intellectually processed. And sometimes it's really antithetical to my sort of perceived way of interacting. Like I might think I need to do it a certain way, but there's this subtle feeling that, you better, that's not necessarily a good approach. Or I might simply respond in a spontaneous way, and I go, oh man, geez. But then down the line, I will see how appropriate that response was. So what I do is I simply respond, and then I allow the circumstances and how the process unfolds around me to inform me as to whether this was actually an intuitive response, or if I somehow missed the information. Natalie.
Is vulnerability needed to be human in its full range?
Yes. Yes, but what's the full range? Yes, the moment I begin to identify that, I say, oh, the full range is this. That's not the full range. I actually put a limit on it. Yes, it's important to be willing to be vulnerable, but not the idea of vulnerability. So if I think I'm being vulnerable, I may not be. I may be following some script. So I need to take that step, see how it unfolds, and in the unfolding, I get to see whether I'm responding to some script around vulnerability, or if I'm actually being vulnerable. It's around this issue, okay? So when we're doing a retreat here, what I do is I tell people, you need to be here on your cushion 5 minutes before. If you're not, at 5 minutes before and I enter the zendo, I close the door. If you show up and the door is closed, you remain outside. Now, to be vulnerable is to accept that. To accept that that's the way that is here. But if I don't have the capacity to be vulnerable, then I'm caught in my own reactions to that circumstance. I have evaluations and judgments. A lot of people call me too rigid. They say, you're too rigid. Because in the end, they want to do whatever they want to do. and call that practice. It's the same with sitting. I see people sitting on a cushion, but they can't really sit on the cushion. They're restless and they're fidgety and they stack up cushions like 6 high and they're doing all sorts of things. And I simply say, look, this is not working for you. Please sit in a chair. And they want to fight with me. Vulnerability is the willingness to accept those simple directions. I mean, I'm not asking them to do anything unethical. I'm not asking them to do anything that's out of the boundaries of good care. I just say, please sit in a chair. I don't want to sit in a chair. I go, it's crazy. But that's the fear of being vulnerable. The ability to follow instructions. Because if I'm not willing to be vulnerable, but I wrap myself around some idea of what it means to be vulnerable, then I'm setting myself up to be exploited. Because I'm not really paying attention to what's happening around me. Nicola.
Hello. My question is, how was your trip to Miami and how was the encounter with the people you met there?
Yes. The trip to Miami was quite smooth. I didn't going down. I did it in two steps. I drove down to a place called Jupiter, Florida, and there's a veteran there. I know he is a professor at one of the universities down there, Florida Atlantic University, and he lives in Jupiter. He and his family live in Jupiter. He regularly attends the veterans gatherings on Sunday evenings. So I drove to his house. It's about 80 miles, so that would be 120 kilometers north of Miami. And I visited with him. I spent the evening there, and we had some conversations. I spent the morning there. Went for a walk. We had a chance to connect, and then from there I drove into Miami because I couldn't check into the hotel. I like to be hosted privately, but in this circumstance, that doesn't seem to be possible, or at least it's expressed as not being possible. So they want the group that invites me puts me up in a hotel. And so check-in was at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. So I left about 1 in the afternoon from Jupiter and drove into Miami and arrived there 5 minutes before 3. It just worked out like that. It wasn't planned. Yeah. While I was there, I had an opportunity to meet with people who run the wellness, the people who run the wellness program for the Miami Beach Police Department. So I went there to the Miami Beach Police Department, and I had an opportunity to meet some of the officers there. I got to meet the chief of police there, and I got to be part of a small briefing on how they deal with the topic of post-traumatic stress within first responders, within the police and firefighters and that sort of thing. And then they invited me also then to sort of let the group know who I was and what I did. And so I had the opportunity to address the people from the police department and the trainers in their wellness department to who I am and what it is that I do. And then in the afternoon, I met with a group of wounded, disabled Israeli soldiers. This is the second time that I have had the privilege to meet with them. And so I presented them, I let them know who I was, what my background was. I also let them know that although I'm a Zen Buddhist monk, I wasn't there to try and convince them or sell them or convert them in any way, that this just happens to be the path that makes sense to me. And I'm here to offer them some tools that can help them establish peace with their own peacefulness if they use them. And then I do the exercise with what's the most important thing in your life, and then with the breath thing. And so we did a period of sitting meditation, we did a period of eating meditation, and then we did a period of questions and responses. And then they had to move on to their next commitment, and my time with these groups was finished. I spent the evening at the hotel where I was staying. Got up at 4:30 in the morning, was on the road at 5:30, and drove straight back here. I got here about 2 in the afternoon here, and was here for sitting last night. So all in all, the trip went quite smooth. Although last night I was still a bit in motion because it's from here to Miami is about 850 kilometers from here to Miami. So it's 9.5, 10-hour drive. Technically, it's 9.5 if you were just go straight. And I did it in about 10 hours with that was 2 stops, one for fuel and one for bathroom and just stretch my legs. And that's also driving within the stated speed limit. Yeah. So, questions? Natalie?
I was wondering if you could share your point of view. What do you think about the current situation in Europe, especially if you think, what do you think, is Russia likely to take the war to other countries?
In truth, Natalie, I don't have any idea. And anyone who does is speculating. Now, a number of European countries, including the United States, which is not a European country but heavily invested in Europe, their defense intelligence agencies have as much information as they have information, but even they don't know. I mean, there's no way to know, really, unless you're inside the heads of the people who are making the decisions. So I wouldn't speculate. When people ask me such questions, I go, I guess we'll see. You know, the best we can do is like Genrai is doing. Genrai is hosting 2 women who are refugees from the Ukraine and helping them to acclimate to Germany, to get the services and support that they need to work with the documents and things they need to fill out. But for us, so there's that opportunity for people in Europe. How can we be of support to the agencies who are responsible for helping these refugees come into the country? And then also, the more important thing is to wake up, to use this as an opportunity to wake up to the roots of war, violence, and suffering in me. You know, war is a collective manifestation of individual suffering. If I want to bring an end to war, I have to wake up to the roots of war, violence, and suffering in me. I have to be willing to live my life different, to be the peace I want to see in the world, to abandon ideological perspectives, and really live the peace I want to see in the world. Yeah? Question? Yes.
My question is, recently I heard someone say they are still connected with themselves being 15 years old and being abandoned by their girlfriend. Like they still have that emotional connection with that young man in themselves. How about yourself? Is there something like that?
I still remember in 3rd grade kissing Judy Burge 27 times in the cloak closet. But it doesn't have any sort of lasting impact on me. No, from time to time things like that pop up. But generally what pops up is my side of things. Like sometimes I have regret for the way in which I behaved in certain circumstances. This is also a very interesting topic for me because under the influence of drugs and alcohol, I'm a drug addict. I was using alcohol and drugs as a way to attempt to get rid of the suffering that I was carrying around, and it wasn't working, and it was creating its own suffering, and so, I've done some like really not nice things. Now, in the way it looks like in today's society and culture, it's like there isn't any sort of room for having made mistakes or done unconscionable things in the past. I'm still held to account for them in the present, even though I am still the same person, but my behavior has changed enormously over the last 2 or 3 decades, and it continues to evolve. So it presents a circumstance because of what I see is because of this. It presents some circumstances where I'm not so keen to be vulnerable. I'm not so keen to be forthcoming. Yeah, I mean, I continue to do it because in the end, it's like part of my commitment is to do that, to be forthcoming in the world. But also, part of my commitment is the Bodhisattva vows to do what I'm invited to do, which is to wake up. That's the essence of Buddhist practice. I must be prepared to give away everything, to let go of everything. That means my life, my reputation. I got to be prepared to give it all away. If I am not prepared to let go of everything, then there's no possibility for me to wake up. None. So yes, I have some regrets. I don't make those mistakes today, though. And in the odd occasion where I'm a bit out of line, I catch it and address it immediately. But yes, so yeah, there were some times where I just did not behave well, and I have some regrets about that. But I can't change anything about what was. I can change the way that kind of energy exists in this present moment. So I don't repeat those patterns.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Questions? Yoshin and then Nicola.
Anshin, last week I met my new boss.
Yeah.
Who was just hired to take over our department. My question is, do you put a lot of stock in first impressions?
Yes, I do. I do put a lot of stock in it. And at the same time, I'm also I'm cautious about reacting to first impressions. I really value them. I trust them. I hold them, and then I see as circumstances unfold how accurate those first impressions were. And today I can say that for the most part, my first impressions are pretty good. So I pay attention to them, and I don't act on them as if they're absolute fact, but hold them and see how events unfold. Yeah? Nicola.
How come that you and KenShin are like separated? Normally we can see both of you, and now we can only see you. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, because I'm the most important. I mean, what? No, Nicola. No, actually, because KenShin's not translating, and she's just doing the bell. This is actually just the way it unfolds. It's not something designed. It's really interesting because I will want to have her on screen as well, and she keeps pushing the camera back to me. So this is her opportunity to not be on the screen. I think she appreciates that. But no, there's nothing designed, or there's nothing nefarious. Nefarious. I don't know what would be a German word for that. Nefarious is something hidden and like not nice. Yeah? Would that be a good translation, Yoshin?
Sure, something sinister.
Yes, sinister. Do you know sinister?
I can't come up with a good
Okay.
word either. But
Sinister. You can look it up. You can look it up in the translator. Nefarious and sinister. But no, there's nothing. There's nothing underlined about it. Nefarious. You got a pen? I'll spell it for you. Okay, here you go. You ready? N-E. Not I, but E. You know, A, B, C, D, E. E. N-E-F-A-R-I-O-U-S. I is this one. O-U-S. That's nefarious.
several people are writing.
Several people are writing. Okay, all right. Yes, and this is something I need to be cautious of in German language, because I and E, they are, like if I say E, in German, the I is E, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I is E and E is
E.
So I have to be really clear when I'm using those letters in English. That's why it's hard to do the E, you know. I could do it like this. Yeah. Good. Question. Yeah, Seishun. And then Kyoto.
Thinking about your answer to Myoshin about first impressions,
Yes.
and my question is, how can you tell the difference between watching things unfold and seeing if your first impressions hold versus the stories we subtly tell ourselves so that our first impressions do hold? Does that make sense? What I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I think this is the benefit of having a disciplined practice, not an ideological one. So when I'm continually stating that if something is not practical, it's not spiritual. I'm referring to that. So we have, part of a disciplined practice is to have a community of like-minded people supported by an authentic teacher, someone who's not ideologically grounded in the notion of practice, so that I have some place. So I have a first impression, and then I can, if I have issues, if I want, I can check that out. I can share that with somebody. You know, what is my commitment? Is my commitment to get the world to conform to my ideas, or is my commitment to be willing to see the world as it is? That's the difference. The difference rests in my commitment, my willingness to see the world as it is, rather even if it crashes my perceptions of it. To be wrong, to see where I am, to see where my thinking is distorted or sideways. You know, I hear so many people hide behind the notion of perception, or they hide behind the notion of opinion. There's a difference between opinion and truth. And so when you confront someone with the truth of a thing, we just muted you because there's noise coming up in the background.
She actually did it.
Oh, okay. All right. So if you, let's see. So if I'm unwilling to listen to something that I don't necessarily agree with, or that crashes my particular worldview, then what I hide behind is, oh, that's your opinion. Rather than being willing to say, to really look at, okay, so this information is contrary to what I'm experiencing or seeing right now. I need to check this out. I need to really check this out. I really need to see if there's any value in that. So, yes, there is always the danger of I have a first impression, and then my subsequent evaluations are simply I formulate them in a way to rationalize or bolster my first impression. There's always that risk, but I really think if I'm rooted in a disciplined practice, if I'm committed to a disciplined practice, rooted in self-reflection, with the attitude to wake up, without any idea what that means, then I'm more willing to not do that, to not attempt to get the world to conform to my idea of things.
Thank you for listening to this episode on ZalthoLIVE. If you would like additional information, please look at the show notes or visit zaltho.org. That's ZALTHO.org. Our work is made possible solely through donations, so please consider making a tax-deductible gift on our website. We wish you well and thank you.